Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. Oh, that sounded very weak. Good afternoon. Thank you. You look really good from here. So very excited to have you here. I'm Angela Batista, and I'm the Vice President for Student Life and also the Special Advisor to the President for Diversity and Inclusion. This is not the culmination because we have some other events after, but the biggest event of today, and we're really excited to see so many of you, and wanted to take a moment to honor where we are. So to get us started, I'd like to introduce Charlie DeMiguezo, a member of the Nulhegan Kusuk Abenaki tribe, who's going to greet our guests.
Miigwech, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be here on a day to honor Martin Luther King especially. I also want to give a good welcome to Dr. Leon Williams, who's here to speak, and to Maria Dykema Erb to also speak. I'd like to make a couple of suggestions or a statement. Champlain, to us it's Bedabok, the water that lies between. And if there's students here in the room, I'm sure you feel the same way at times. But it was a natural boundary, not to separate people, but to recognize that there was another language and another culture on the other side of the lake, and that this was our place here, our homeland. Our homeland is Nadakana. It means our homeland, literally that, and it doesn't mean in the sense of our ownership. We realized that we were guests here, that we were born into this as naturally as the animals and nature was here, and that we were a part of that. And we tried to sustain that throughout our culture today. Having been state recognized, it seems to me that before that period of time, we were asked all the time to come and speak at social history, anthropology classes. I was honored to do that. I've lectured in federal Indian law. But those times are over. Today is for Martin Luther King. In my experience, we did not get recognized, or even we were a hidden people for a long time. It wasn't until we had fish-ins where we were ticketed and arrested, and the courts decided that we had Aboriginal rights. And we built upon one victory upon another, and until 2010, we were recognized by the state of Vermont, and a Native American Commission was founded in 2009. And I was honored to be part of that process, but it was a fight to get beyond the way people thought about who we were, about culture, about color, about why we were here, and having to change those ideas in terms of the way that the general greater community thinks, and how we think about the greater community. These things had to be worked on and changed. The key word that they use these days is decolonization. To change the way we think is to change our hearts, to change the way that we look at things because of what we've been told about what history is repeatedly. It's not something that we take notes on or is drilled into our heads for examination later. But it's how we relate to each other, how we greet each other, how we're going to do those things from here forward. We never have a word for goodbye. Oleone is the word that we use. We'll see you again. And we've always used that word, and it's always been something that was close to us in our hearts. Also, to bring some humor into things, not to be so serious about the cause, about what's going on. It's easy to understand or point to things that are always wrong, but at the times that we had to fight the most, we tried to interject some humor into it. One of my favorites was how many Abenakis did it take to screw in a light bulb? And my reply to them when we were at committee work at the State House was, none. We are people of the dawn. and it's to interject those types of things is to make us all human. It's not necessarily an us versus them all the time, but it's find a way that's a common ground in order to take that next step for a people and a culture to move ahead. And Dr. King knew this. He worked on those victories the same way that we're trying to do that today. And I think he is the best example that we have in this country in order to go forward. I would like to give an honoring and a blessing. This is life tobacco. We make it seasonally. It's supposed to last us from to the next period where we make more. We make no more or no less, but just enough to get through the season. We use it in ceremony to smoke. We use it to burn in fire for prayer. And it's always that mindfulness in terms of, where we came from, who we are to each other, and to be able to relate to that. I call in the old ones, the ancestors. Nigawak sik, Igamasawak, Iganawaki, Ibagawasa, Iganasawaki, Igane Aonabak, Wanamaka, Inawarkis, Inmakabasabi, Ottawa, Isi, Wanajizi, Bagada, Igasawasga. Grandmothers, grandfathers, ancestors, we remember you. We honor you. If you would please accept this tobacco offering. We thank you very much. We remember you. The Great Spirit is in all things. He is in the air we breathe. The Great Spirit is our Father, but the earth is our mother. She nourishes us. That which we put into the ground, she returns to us. It's where we're all going to return to and be part of once again. We ask you to be with us today, old ones.
Thank you, Charlie. We're grateful to have you with us today. So I wanted to take a moment to welcome everyone who's here, but also we are live streaming, so welcome to those that are watching, and wanted to especially send a greeting to our partners in Dublin and Montreal, and our online learners who are watching us from all over the country and probably all over the world. So we're glad that you're with us. Champlain College has celebrated MLK in a variety of ways over the years. And prior to the establishment of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, which happened in 2007, a tradition of hosting a full day of programming and service was established under the leadership of Nancy Cathcart, who served as the inaugural director of the Center for Civic Engagement. I want to honor her today. In 2007, the celebration took a more formal form when Nancy and I partnered in the new OD office to create a more formal program. The first formal celebration happened in that year and was a collaboration between the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, the Center for Civic Engagement, and many other offices. Over the last few years, the college has continued to honor the legacy of MLK in many different ways, and the 2018 celebration marks a renewed commitment to this celebration as one of our institutional signature programs. I would like to acknowledge the Let Us Teach Committee, who planned a full day of films and presentations from members of our community, students, faculty, and staff. Thank you to President Lackman for sponsoring today's event and many other partners who have supported us. You have a program, and there's a long list of partners, and so please do take a moment to look at those. We are really grateful to you. Let's give them all a hand. Thank you. So we are a learning institution, and so we are about students. So to get us formally started, I would like to introduce Kiana Best, one of our students. Let me tell you a little bit about Kiana before she comes up here. She's a member of the class of 2019. She's majoring in secondary education with a focus in English, just like me. Her hometown is East Windsor, New Jersey. She's a very engaged student leader on campus and serves as the president of Shades of Me and the director of diversity and engagement for the Student Government Association. Please help me welcome Kiana Best.
Good afternoon. Today, we celebrate the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was a great speaker, leader, and activist. He led many boycotts, protests, and marches in his lifetime. The words of Dr. King continue to be spread and heard even 50 years after his murder. His unrelenting message and fight for equality and social justice is still being channeled by today's young activists. Dr. King has undoubtedly inspired every single person who has spoken or presented on our campus today, faculty, staff, and students alike. Some may wonder why we continue to celebrate this man and honor his achievements. Would the same question be asked if he were a white man? How many people question why we celebrate George Washington's birthday? We celebrate Dr. King because he too is a significant figure in American history. Dr. King helped to lead a revolution during his time, and though he did not live to see it, the impact was insurmountable. After the March on Washington in 1963 and the famous I Have a Dream speech, the Civil Rights Act was passed. That march was a crucial reason as to why the act was passed, and without it, there would never have been desegregation in the 60s. Without Dr. King, who knows which generation would have been able to accomplish what he did. Even if we are no longer marching in the streets as often, we are still benefiting from Dr. King's leadership and pushing ourselves to continue his work. Yes, the original civil rights movement is over. However, the fight is not. If you have the opportunity to listen to the presentations given today by students on this campus, you can see that. The racism and discrimination that we face daily has been highlighted and showcased over and over. We remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. for what he has done in the past, and we thank him for it. We also thank him for showing us that we do not have to be afraid to fight for what we know is right. Despite harassment and threats, we will continue to stand and march forward. Dr. King has given us a future where we can use whatever resources are available to us, and we are no longer separated by race or ethnicity. Now, we must keep on fighting for ourselves and work for the children of the future. We must continue the work so that they do not have to fear police officers, and so that they can walk into a store without being followed around as if they were to steal something. So today, we thank Dr. King with speeches, seminars, and discussions about our experiences, and we commit to continuing to honor him and his legacy every day with our actions and perseverance. Thank you.
And now it is my pleasure to welcome President Don Lackman to say his remarks.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you, Kiana, for your remarks. Welcome to the faculty, students, staff, and community members who are with us here today. I want to thank everyone who pulled together the rich programming that we had in this room and in the auditorium today. I had the opportunity to attend some of the presentations here in the Champlain room, and I applaud the faculty, students, and staff who used this Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a way to explore issues of race and identity at the college and in the classroom through the Let Us Teach committee prompted by Elaine Young. I am also looking forward to our keynote speakers, Dr. Williams and Ms. Erb, and thank them for making the trip to Burlington, Vermont to share this day with us. I used to think of MLK Day as a celebration of the progress we had made on race. It felt good that our country had set aside a day to honor this great black man who did so much to advance civil rights in our country. I was passive in my observance. I did not see this as a date a call to action, a rallying cry for me to do something to improve the state of race in our country. I instead saw it as a declaration of victory, a mission accomplished. As I reflect on the events of the past year, I realize we haven't fixed the race issue in America. I had hoped that electing our first black president had moved us beyond the question of race. Some of us have been in denial about the problems of race in America, and I've been one of these people. I want to share words from an op-ed that Dr. Ibram X. Kendi wrote in this weekend's New York Times. I quote him at length. He starts, "When our reality is too ugly, we deny reality. It is too painful to look at. Reality is too hard to accept. A new vocabulary of denial has emerged, allowing users to evade admissions of racism. It still holds fast after all these years. The vocabulary list includes these: law and order, war on drugs, reverse discrimination, race neutral, welfare queen, handout, tough on crime, personal responsibility, black on black crime, achievement gap, no excuses, race card, colorblind, post-racial, illegal immigrant, Obamacare, war on cops, Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, entitlements, voter fraud, economic anxiety. The denials using these phrases come from both conservatives and white liberals who think that people of color are stuck in cycles of unstable families and criminal cultures, and that the deprivations of poverty and discrimination spin out bad people. Dr. Kendi goes on, those denials echo the same ones that frustrated Dr. King in 1963 as he sat in a Birmingham jail cell and wrote, "Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will." As a white male of privilege, and great privilege because I'm privileged to lead this institution, I have a responsibility to deepen my understanding of racism in America, its corrosive effects, and the actions necessary to fix it. Racism and injustice are as prevalent now as at any time in our history, and the shallow understanding of this fact does great harm. I have a friend who's running for Congress in Alabama, and she sent me an email this morning. It read in part, "The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King taught us that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. I used to take this to mean that although we are riddled by fear and anxiety about our current injustices, we can take comfort in knowing that justice will eventually come. So I sat back and watched and waited for it. I thank God for making sure it would all work itself out. I now know the arc does not bend on its own. It does not bend because God wills it to bend. It bends because real people here on earth reach up and grab it. We pull on it. We bend it. It is our thirst for justice and our willingness to work for that determines the angle of that arc, the speed with which justice is brought near." I thank my friend Tabitha for sharing her words. It is time to stop denying our problems and to take this day we set aside to honor Dr. King not as a celebration, but as a call to action. We must be willing to explore our own biases and prejudices. We must take it upon ourselves to seek to understand. We must not be passive, but must be vulnerable in pursuit of greater understanding and be willing to reach up and grab that arc of justice. And we should do this together. Together, we will increase our understanding of each other, and together, we will make Champlain College a more inclusive community. Thank you.
So before we get to our keynote speaker, I wanted to take a couple of minutes to reflect on what this day means to me. I grew up in Brooklyn, and I am the daughter of immigrants. My mom worked as a seamstress in a factory. My father worked in a supermarket as a janitor, where he was locked in overnight to avoid thieves from coming in, but he couldn't get out if there was an emergency. As a first-generation college student, I did not have many role models. I first learned about Martin Luther King Jr. in high school, and I was very inspired the moment that I learned about him, and it was really about his courage. You see, the violence that filled my community was the one that he was fighting against. The equity and social justice he was fighting to get was not abstract in my life, but everyday a reality. Dr. King's life and legacy, as you have heard, has transcended the generations. He was a true leader during one of the most heated and oppressive times in our history. He was not the only one, but the movement he animated is still relevant today. I believe that in these uncertain times, and very difficult times for many of us, his message of reconciliation through nonviolence remains very important. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. That is my favorite quote from MLK. In the face of reality that includes a systemic oppression, racism, police brutality, violence in American cities, injustices within the criminal justice system, anti-immigrant and anti-refugee sentiments, and the highest numbers of Black and brown incarcerated youth in American history, there's a lot of work to be done. And faced with these daunting obstacles, Dr. King also reminds us that we cannot walk alone, as President Lackman just said. As we walk, we must make the promise that we shall always march ahead in solidarity. We cannot turn our backs. We cannot look back. We must believe that we can move forward together. Part of the reason that we celebrate Dr. King's legacy every year is to remind us that as a community, we should work intentionally to live out our commitment to inclusion every day. The best way to honor Dr. King is to work together to eradicate injustice and despair in our everyday life, in our college community, and throughout the world. We must work together so that we can eliminate disparities in achievement and change structures in higher education to ensure access and success for all students. We must do that so that each of us will be understood and accepted for who we are and not judged based on stereotypes and biases. I believe that if we each commit to doing our part, we can create a community that is truly inclusive and equitable. But to do so, we must hold each other up every day, not put each other down. We must be courageous and willing to step out of our comfort zone every day, not remain silent in the face of injustice, racism, sexism, discrimination, and the alienation of others. Challenge and question ourselves and those around us. We must examine and scrutinize the systems within which we move every day, including our social spheres, our political spheres, our families, schools, places of work, churches, and community organizations. And we must look beyond our differences and focus on our common values and hopes. To close, I want to talk particularly to our young people and to those that feel afraid that the current uncertainty and divisiveness in our country is impacting them every day. Mahatma Gandhi, of whom Dr. King was a great admirer, said that you must be part of the change you wish to see in the world. Change happens when ordinary citizens like Dr. King, like you, and like me engage in issues and become involved. In her last official speech, First Lady Michelle Obama reminded us that this country belongs to you, to all of you, from every background and walk of life. If you and your parents are immigrants, know that you are part of a proud American tradition. The infusion of new cultures and talents and ideas, generation after generation, that has made us the greatest country on earth. I hope that today's celebration reminds us of his legacy, but also reminds us that we have an opportunity, and more importantly, a responsibility to be part of creating the change that we want and that we need. Like Dr. King, we must be focused, determined, and hopeful. Let us dare. Oops, sorry, that's a little early. I was daring, okay. Okay, thank you for allowing me that moment. Okay, so I am going to introduce our speakers. Dr. Leon Williams is a native of Youngstown, Ohio, which was once described as the most crooked city in America. Dr. Williams holds a doctorate of ministry from Virginia University of Lynchburg, a Master of Science in Education from the University of Dayton, and a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from Ohio Northern University. He currently serves as the youth young adult pastor at First Missionary Baptist Church in Concord, North Carolina. He has held numerous roles in higher education, including as director of the Multicultural Center at Elon University and director of the Intercultural Program at Buena Vista University. Dr. Williams is also Chief Executive Officer of T.L. Williams and Associates, a consulting firm he founded in 2008 to provide diversity intelligence to managers, executives, and proprietors. He is committed to improving the lives of others in his community and has earned various awards and certificates. He is an active and passionate volunteer for Habitat for Humanity and local after-school programs. He has also traveled much of the United States, delivering seminars, diversity training programs, and many other events that are designed to challenge assumptions, biases, and misconceptions about identity and difference. He has been featured speaker at some of the most renowned conferences, and with a creative approach to the fortification of diversity perspectives, he has written a number of short stories and plays. He's most proud of his 2007 musical, Follow the Yellow Brick Road. His other plays include It's My Room, Cotton for Two, Nana, Pennies from Heaven, and The Talented 10. Maria Dykema Erb is a higher education and student affairs professional with a wide range of experience in admissions, enrollment management, academic dean's office, and program administration, as well as the holistic development of students with diverse backgrounds. As a proud first-generation college student and graduate, Maria Erb holds a Bachelor of Science in Hotel Administration from the University of New Hampshire and a Master of Education in Interdisciplinary Studies with a concentration in higher ed, leadership, and counseling from the University of Vermont. She had a long career at the University of Vermont and held several roles at the institution. She worked in the undergraduate admissions office, the Women's Agricultural Network, the Rubinstein School of Environmental and Natural Resources, and the Alana Student Center. After 20 years at UVM, she moved with her family to North Carolina to take a position as Associate Director of College Access and Success in the Multicultural Center at Elon University. Following Elon, she served as a Senior Program Coordinator for Master of Science in the Nursing Program at Duke, and she currently works at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, as Co-Director for Diversity and Student Success in Graduate School. Ms. Erb's passion is serving as a meaning-making mentor. She enjoys encouraging those around her to reach their fullest potential, whether they be best young professionals, colleagues, friends, or family. So before I have Dr. Williams start, I just want to say it's a lot to read, and you have it in your program, right? And it's important to read because it is important for you to hear this. It's important for our students to hear this. That's why I read it, okay? So I just want to tell you that Dr. Williams is going to join us in a moment, and he's going to join us as Dr. Martin Luther King. We are going to start with a video. So I may need some help because I think I pressed the, I got there, okay. I'm kind of smart. Let's see what happens. There we go. There we go, okay.
At this time, I have the honor of presenting you the moral leader of our nation. I have the pleasure of presenting you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. of freedom in the history of our nation. Years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as the great decolonized hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize the painful condition. Ever since we come to our nation's capital to cash a check, and the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration. They were filing a promissory note with every American across the floor there. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as our citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check. A check which has come back marked insufficient funds.
Good evening. It is my honor and privilege to be with you today. I would like to thank the students, faculty, and staff for inviting me to share my perspective on the importance of reconciliation in America. A special thanks to Angela Batista for her relentless focus on peace and justice. Let me begin with a disclaimer that if I sound faint, it is because my health is deteriorating. I must be honest with you. It is difficult to travel from city to city and state to state with excruciating pain in my back and legs. Although I enjoy traveling and meeting new people, I am often less enthusiastic because my health competes for my attention. Nonetheless, I press on because the good Lord has strengthened me. Several months ago, I was asked to speak at a luncheon for graduating high school students in the city of Chicago. And as I was walking up the steps, I noticed a gentleman lying on the ground holding a sign that read "Freedom Every Day." Although I did not have time to stop and talk with the gentleman, I was moved by his statement of faith. Moments later, I walked into the room and I took my seat. And as I greeted administrators and exchanged pleasantries with students, I pondered deeply the notion of freedom every day. When I took the podium, I shared with the audience that freedom every day is a personal cry for community support. I went on to say that freedom every day cannot be lived until freedom every day is granted to every person. This phrase, freedom every day, has never left my consciousness. It is my belief that the cry for freedom every day suggests that the signatures etched with a quill pen on the Declaration of Independence were forgeries. In order for the American people to experience freedom every day, the nation must solicit new signatures or trace in fresh ink the fading signatures confirming that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I believe that this generation, unlike no other, is prepared and ready to lead the nation toward freedom every day. You've labored in love instead of malice, concern instead of resentment, and charity instead of thievery. This generation, unlike the former, is willing to be on the receiving end of the water hose. This generation, unlike the former, is willing to contest police brutality by standing between the billy club and the usual suspects. This generation is willing to call off the attacking dogs and blow out the flame that ignite church fires. This generation is prepared to lead itself. You've prayed for those who despitefully used you, blessed them that cursed you, done good by those who hate you. You are the moral compass of this nation. Unlike a navigational compass, which has 4 cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, a moral compass has 4 covenantal markings: peace, justice, solidarity, and love. The difference between a navigational compass and a moral compass is that a navigational compass provides direction relative to the surface of the earth, while the moral compass provides direction relative to the character of God. A navigational compass is inspired by direction, but a moral compass is inspired by truth and faith. A country without a moral compass is a country refusing to lift itself out of the ashes of hate, knowing that hate is the stench that contaminates the fabric of this nation. As a result, this residue of hate lingers, creating toxins that can blur our seeing, congest our breathing, and muffle our speaking. This type of secondhand hate is breathed and ingested, passed through generation after generation, and serves as a health hazard for every man, woman, and child. We are in dire need of hate-free places. Our schools must be hate-free. Our jobs must be hate-free. Our communities must be hate-free. Our homes must be hate-free. And most importantly, our hearts must be hate-free. In a recent interview with the local television network back in Atlanta, I was asked the question, when you think about America, what comes to mind? I paused for a moment. I looked at the interviewer, and then I looked directly into the camera, and I said, love. The interviewer, astonished, commented, I was not expecting you to say that. I followed my remarks by asserting, love is justice, finish line. Love is the period at the end of the sentence of peace. Love is the cutting of the ribbon, joy's first lady, the bride's groom, and freedom's starting line. It is my belief one of the reasons why America has failed to reconcile racial tension is because America has coerced the victims of racism and discrimination to view brokenness as life. America has disgracefully asked the broken to mend its brokenness, but only for the benefit of being broken again. Those who stand in solidarity with those in power are guilty by association. Brokenness by way of racism and discrimination is not love. This is cause for concern because we haven't moved far from the bystander mentality of old, whereas the traditional bystander never fights for freedom and justice. The 21st century bystander stands close to the fight but never enters the ring. The traditional bystander shows his face on occasion. In the 21st century bystander never hides its face. If we allow the 21st century bystander to remain comfortable, truth will be nothing more than half truth, and love will present herself as pity. More importantly, reconciliation will once again fall on the shoulders of the oppressed. In order for this nation to take the next step toward greatness, reconciliation must be the first order of business for the oppressor. Reconciliation is an outward demonstration of an inward transformation. Reconciliation understands that a change of mindset is needed to change the world. Reconciliation can only be achieved if truth is a universal language of the oppressor and the oppressed. When I think back to the 60s, fiery eyes and wrinkled brows reflected courage and hope. Since then, many of us have campaigned for reconciliation despite truth, and as a result, our courage and hope has turned into anger and hopelessness. I realize that some politicians and leaders would suggest avoiding this conversation regarding truth to extend bigotry. In my mind, America never intended to lift the veil to kiss its bride in holy matrimony. In fact, America has left truth and her maid of honor, hope, at the altar. Some years back, I had the pleasure of having dinner with Prime Minister Nehru of India, an apprentice of Mahatma Gandhi. Throughout our discussion, I learned that nonviolence is not a retreat from confrontation, but rather confrontation in the form of civil disobedience. He went on to say the conversation can't stop at civil disobedience. There must be a conversation about truth. And truth of the matter is that many of us negotiate truth while others serve as lenders of truth. The problem with this agreement is that one party occupies truth and the other manages truth. This type of mastery and trickery forges justice and equality's signature with invisible ink. And when tears of pain hit the paper, words of deceit appear. It is important for us to understand that for the next 100 years, love's closest companion must be truth. If we want love in our communities, love in our schools, love in our neighborhoods, truth has to walk in love's shadow. If we choose to ignore truth, we are accepting lies, deceit, and propaganda as fact. And if lies, deceit, and propaganda stand above truth, then America is nothing more than a posture of hope. In many respects, we have become strangers to truth, which perpetuates fear And whenever fear is coupled with true vulnerability, abandonment and demolition are soon to follow. Instead of honoring or renewing our vows to truth, we have chosen a path of separation, which leads to divorce. The problem in America is that divorce of truth is devoid of love. My heart is heavy because we are shadow boxing and winning. Darkness has a way of connecting on every punch in many corners of the world. Now we stand beaten, bruised, and veiled with the standing 8 count. 1, slavery never ended. 2, women's liberation has been eluded worldwide. 3, poverty outlived promises. 4, hunger has been prolonged. 5, public education lacks resources. 6, fair wages seem unattainable. 7, unemployment is pervasive. 8, racial profiling is rampant. Confused, dazed, and stupefied, we lean against the ropes, hopeless. If we fail to act now, justice and peace will remain unconscious. America must wake up and regain its consciousness. If America is unable to lift its head, then America is casket ready. America has always been a resilient nation, and I have no doubt that America will one day step out of the boat of fear and into the water of truth. I believe in order to resuscitate this nation, we have to revisit the heart-rending waters of injustice and inequality, to lower our buckets in the well of hate and to find forgiveness. One would argue that you cannot draw forgiveness from a deep-seated well of hate. Well, I disagree. I have found that underneath hate, wickedness, and racism is the fresh water of forgiveness. For centuries, America has refused to lower its buckets to avoid asking for forgiveness of self. Forgiveness is the highest calling because the oppressor and the oppressed have to draw from the same well. Historically, this has not been the case. Too often, the oppressed return from the well with more pain and sorrows. I believe that someday the oppressed will lower its buckets to find hurt no more. Let me be clear. Forgiveness is not a scar remover. Forgiveness unwraps the bandages of oppression and examines the wound to determine the growth pattern for healing. Forgiveness is a conscious, intentional decision to release feelings of resentment and regret, which expedites the healing process. America is afraid of admitting the wrongfulness in the first. Admitting any wrongdoings is a conflict of interest for most, because very few people will vilify themselves by identifying as perpetuators of hate. America has been acquitted on several accounts of hate, which suggests that the jury is still out on forgiveness. If you fear that my words are dark and pessimistic, fear not. If you fear that my words are unfair in judgment, fear not. I've come that I may speak truth, not fear. Now, if your hearing is not accustomed to truth, any mention of truth will be interpreted as a threat, which triggers fear. The enemy of truth interprets truth as fear opposed to untruth. Truth is fear's burial shroud. To ensure a proper burial, the pall barriers of righteousness must lower the coffin of fear in the ground. In the 1950s and 60s, we marched on Washington, protested at lunch counters, stood in harm's way, and crossed the bridge of intimidation. But truth wasn't there. We've escaped captivity. We've stared death in the face, but truth wasn't there. Truth wasn't there because only the oppressed experience suffering and pain. Truth doesn't cause physical force, doesn't cause physical force. Truth doesn't inflict pain intentionally. Truth never resorts to weapons and violence. Truth angers at the sight of oppression. Truth stands firmly in opposition to evil and evildoers. Truth has two functions. It either relegates or supports power. In the case of injustice and inequality, truth transforms power by reducing the powerful and endowing the powerless. This level of understanding is key to the progress of this nation, because privileged groups never surrender their power and position. They negotiate their power and position. They negotiate the power and position of others. The oppressor does not argue what is morally right. The oppressor argues what is immorally right. Truth is the spoken word, scribed in the hearts of righteous. Truth is the spiritual ingredient of justice. Truth, like love, seeks nothing in return. Truth all by itself is nothing more or nothing less than truth. Truth chooses to stand in places where others have refused to stand. Truth is light in darkness. Until we come to know truth, this nation is a threat to itself. America will remain the aggressor and the victim, judge and juror, prosecutor and conspirator, defender and prosecutor. Until we come to know truth, we are denying ourselves freedom every day. A choice must be made today. The bait of Satan cannot sway the waters of righteousness. We cannot allow hate's vine to produce grapes of wrath and wine of destruction. Truth sobers the drunken-hearted, stands him up on his feet, and challenges him to walk without blunder. But truth without love is like a bow without an arrow. Love is caring for the homeless and those less fortunate. Love is feeding the hungry. Love is obedience over sacrifice. Love not only takes life's numerous bumps and blows, love kisses the hand of oppression and says no more. Love not only gives the power and courage to remove bandages of abuse, love neutralizes the weapons of hate. The problem in the world today is that we have very, very little remembrance of what love is. We have forgotten how to love and be loved. Let me remind you, love is reconciliation. Love is restoration. Love is restitution. Love is truth, and love is forgiveness. We need love because love converts reconciliation, restoration, and restitution to an oasis of healing. Currently, our love is drawn from depictions of slavery, Jim Crow laws, and signs of segregation. Our love is birthed out of police brutality, billy clubs, barking dogs, and fire hoses. Our current love hasn't stopped racial profiling, human trafficking, drug trafficking, hunger, poverty, racism, classism, ableism, and anti-Semitism. Our love hasn't worked on the flat plains of Iowa. Our love hasn't worked in the valley of Ohio. Our love hasn't worked on the mountains of Tennessee and along the coast of California. Our love draws from the periods of pain and suffering. This type of love is hazardous to the health of this nation. This is not love that moves a country forward. This love is conditional. This is not agape love and an unconditional love. Agape love is redemptive love, which is God's love. God's love is a saving love. God's love is deliverance from guilt and shame. God's love is payment of sins. God's love doesn't return void. God's love is living a life of integrity. God's love is not consent to take advantage of others. God's love does not allow conspiracy and propaganda to serve as chaperones of peace and justice. God's love removes the devil from the guest list. Over the last 40 years, I've spent a great deal of time re-examining the fundamental ideals of nonviolence. In my exploration, I have learned that nonviolence didn't lessen the force of waters that propelled protesters against concrete buildings, nor did it stop fatal blows of police brutality. In many respects, one could argue that nonviolence perpetuated tolerance. It's time to rethink nonviolence. No disrespect to the civil rights leaders of yesterday, but initially nonviolence was designed to train the heart and the mind. According to some, violence and organized crime are exercises of the heart and the mind. Nonviolence can no longer share the stage with violence. It's time to close the curtain on violence. Bigotry must be pushed down the mountain. Racism and sexism should never reach the snow caps of peace. Love is the view from the mountaintop. Only love can see despair. Only love can see brokenness. Only love can see hunger. Only love can see homelessness. Only love understands addiction. Only love understands hurt. Only love understands pain and suffering. I was walking some time ago through an airport, and a reporter stopped me, and he noticed who I was, and he said, "Dr. King, may I have a moment of your time?" I answered, "Sure." Although I was trying to press toward my gate, I was willing to help the eager young reporter. The next thing that happened took me by surprise. This reporter asked me one question that I had never been asked before. He said, "Dr. King, if your life was abruptly interrupted, how would you like to be remembered?" With some hesitation, I responded, "My life is my message. And if you know my message, then you have remembered me. I've tried for more than 50 years to live a life with dignity and respect, but I know that my days are numbered. When my time comes and my window closes, I don't want a long eulogy. Whoever speaks at my funeral, tell them not to mention the schools I attended. Tell them not to mention what awards I received. All I want them to say is that I tried to feed the hungry. I tried to clothe those who were naked. Tell the people that I tried to live right. Tell the people on that day that I visit the sick and shut in. I visited those who were in prison. Say that I fought for peace and justice. Tell the people I stood in harm's way. Tell the people that my obedience was greater than my sacrifice. I want the people to know. For peace, I fought every day. For justice, I fought every day. For love, I fought every day. For health, I fought every day. For children, I fought every day. For you, I fought every day. For God Almighty, I fought every day. For freedom, I fought every day. That's what I want them to remember. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. So we'll give Dr. Williams a minute to arrive since we just saw Dr. King. I just want to mention the monologue that Dr. Williams shared with us is one of 3 in his book, A View from the Mountaintop. We were scheduled to have a book signing, however, we will not be able to have that. I'm sorry to disappoint. I do encourage you to go to our website where there is a link where you can order the book, so you can read the other 2 monologues, which were also very moving. We're going to spend what's left of our time together, giving a chance for our guests to share a little bit more about their experiences and who they are, and then we're going to open them for Q&A, and we're encouraging you to participate. We do have 2 mics, and we're going to ask you to use those when we get to that point, because we are live streaming and we want those watching to be able to hear us. So, mic's on. Maria, is your mic on?
I think so.
Okay, good. All right. So, I don't know how to turn this off. Okay, here we go. So, Dr. Williams, welcome.
Welcome. How you doing?
So I'm going to turn it over to you so you can transition us a little bit.
Yes. I just want to say and really encourage students. Oftentimes when I do the monologue, and I've been doing it for nearly 15 years now, 3 different speeches. This all started as an opportunity when I was serving as director of the Multicultural Center at Ohio Northern University. And I was like, well, how do I program? How can I program for students to help commemorate the life and legacy of Dr. King? How can I do that? And I began to just research and write, and something compelled me to try to emulate, because it's one thing to read about Dr. King, right, and to watch videos, but how can I bring to life King, if you will, and tone and gestures and his oral brilliance and his articulate and eloquent writing. And so I was like, how can I bring that back to life for students? Because we, unfortunately, and many of us in this room, we didn't have an opportunity to meet King or see King in person. So this started as early as 1994, 93, 94, where I began to just think about that. And over time, I have been able to just broaden my scope of knowledge when it comes to the ideology of nonviolence. And I tapped into, obviously, Mahatma Gandhi, Henry David Thoreau. I read a lot of books about Dr. King from a lot of opinionated writers and scholars about Dr. King. I've done a lot of work in social justice and looking at the inadequacies and deficiencies in our society. So I've done a lot of homework. So I want you to understand where this is birthed out of. I'm not a drama major. I'm not a writer. My background is a business degree and a master's degree, and now seminary. I'm a pastor actually at a church in Charlotte. And so this work has evolved over time, and I tried to write each monologue over a 3 to 5 year period. And I let life happen a little bit. So, and the reason why I'm telling you is to encourage students. This wasn't my passion. This wasn't part of my plan. This wasn't a giftedness of mine. And so I want you to understand, regardless of your major, be encouraged to follow your passion. What's your passion? Those things that you find troubling in life that you want to solve and address immediately. That is what your passion is. You will have a drive for those things. I was headed in an entirely different direction when God said, I need you to do this work. And it was just writing a monologue. And I was fortunate to travel around to different colleges to share. My first monologue in the book is Shattered Dreams. My second one is Mine Eyes Have Seen the Glory. And then this third one is The View from the Mountaintop. But it wasn't until I met my colleague and friend here at Elon University who learned about what I do. I was like, okay, I got to take some time off of work. I got to travel to a college. And she said, well, where are you going? I'm doing a monologue of Dr. King. She said, oh, really? So she took a look at the work, and she said, oh, you're like writing epistles. You're writing letters to America. I said, what? I was like, what? That's a little heavy for me, you know what? She's like, it's scholarly personal narrative writing. I'm like, what? That just messed me up even more. What are you talking about? I just write this to come up with a program. So for me, it was just a program for January. Maria helped me understand and unpack my writing. So when you hear things that's troubling in society about how we're functioning as a community, as a country, as a nation, Maria says, why do you feel that way? Well, I've had this background and this experience. My mother's from Alabama, my father's from South Carolina, and they came to Ohio with this perspective that was quite different than what I was living. And she said, well, what does that mean? And she started asking all these questions, being intrusive, right? And I'm like, well, where are you going with this, Maria? Maria helped me understand meaning making. She wanted me to unpack, not just write the monologues. She wanted me to unpack the thought, the exercise, what goes through my thought process to actually write. This book was supposed to have been out a year ago. But the trouble we've had in this country since 2015, 16, and all that I was seeing on the news, I had a moment. I said, how can I ask America to love itself? How can I ask people to turn the other cheek? How can I honestly, with integrity, ask this country to be bigger than what we're witnessing? I'm seeing people get shot and killed unarmed. And I told Maria, I can't put this book out. I stopped writing. I stopped thinking. I had to step away. Because I was asking America to do something that I was struggling with. So we shelved it. And we had to come back to it. Because I said the words, no matter how challenging it may be to the listener, we need to have this conversation. Because people continue to die and be taken advantage of and abused. So that's a little history in the background, and I want to thank my colleague and friend for her leadership in pushing me to write deeper. Not just the monologue, but what else is inside of you, Leon? That is really what has brought me to this point of understanding my calling and what I need to share with all of you.
Thank you, Leon. So, Maria, when you and I first talked about the possibility of you coming, you shared with me that one of the things you were most proud of was the ability that Leon and you built together to continue to work on building a relationship across difference, that you were so different when you first met or perceived each other as so different, yet you were able to do that. So how has this journey been for you?
So I'm a Vermonter. I grew up here in Vermont, and due to the cold weather that we're all experiencing today outside, we decided to move to North Carolina. And so what brought me on my journey, and it is so fascinating, and I had the privilege of writing the foreword of the book. So I look at life very much through a faith-based lens. That's very important to me. And so I believe in a higher calling, and you know, what was the purpose? And it was difficult to uproot our family and move. This has been home for many, many years. But in my foreword, I write about how I was called to go to Elon, and Leon hired me. In the foreword, I said, maybe it wasn't for Elon, but it was for Leon. So the transposition of the letters. So you look for the signs in life, right? And so I just really, you know, Leon and I are so different from one another, but yet we are not. Because you find those common threads, you find those things that connect you. And so rather than focusing on the differences, what we were able to do is focus on, you know, family life. Leon has a family, I have a family. Like, we loved getting together, like the whole multicultural center where I worked. We'd cook, like Keith and I, my husband and I would cook. We considered the multicultural center our family, so they'd all come over. We'd get so loud in our apartment sometimes. I'm like, oh, the neighbors are gonna call toll on us. We're so loud, but we're just laughing and enjoying each other. So focusing on that, Leon and I are both first-generation college students. So, you know, what was that experience? How do we find those common bonds with one another? So what was really wonderful about doing this book, and you know, we have to give much tribute and gratitude to Dr. Robert Nash, who was my master's advisor here at the University of Vermont. While I was working, I was able to get my master's degree. And so through the coursework that I took with Dr. Nash, I was introduced to scholarly personal narrative. And it was hard for me at first because I'm like, wait a minute, what do you mean? Like, my story is an important story, you know? How is my story of a Korean adoptee growing up on a dairy farm in North Ferrisburgh, Vermont, you know, how is that a relevant story or an important story? And what I found in my work in higher education and how Leon and I could connect was that those stories matter. And for us to bring those stories together and to demonstrate the collegiality and friendship across difference we modeled for students. You know, this is what you can have. You know, we come from very different backgrounds. And I think what just for me, this project, like, I loved supporting in this project for the book. It's something that I never, ever dreamed I would do. And on my list of life's goals, I was like, I have to bring Leon to Vermont one day. Like, he's got to meet my people. My Vermont people need to meet Leon.
Next time in June. I'm just saying. I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, I am a brother code up here.
So for me, I am very proud to share all of you, Vermont, Champlain College, the community members, with Leon, because you all were so important to me just throughout my life. And so for him to see a little bit of my life from my past. So it was really a blessing and a privilege to be able to work on this book. And it was like, you know, Leon would tell me, you know, I'd say, okay, you did your edits. I did my edits, I did my part. When are you going to write back? And so we had to have some conversations over the phone to say, and I understood it, I got it, and I wasn't going to push you in any way because I knew with Black Lives Matter, all of the movements happening, I knew where he was. I knew that he had to just put it away for a little bit. And I had to respect that because it was not on my agenda or my timeline. It was truly, I said, you know what? This book's going to come out when it's supposed to come out. And we will be, that's when it's supposed to come out. And it did. It did. And here we are today. So it's been wonderful.
Thank you. I think this is your first time together, right? So this is the inaugural tour.
Yes.
So,
Yes. I've told so many people I'm headed to Vermont, and they're like, "You going where?" You know. Hello to my wife and my kids that's watching. Thank you for your support. I'm good. They treated me well. I love it. We're moving now.
all right, so we're going to open it for discussion. There are 2 mics, so if you have a question, please line up. We have about 12 minutes to do this, and then we're going to come back to you to wrap a little bit. So any questions, just go to the mic or comments.
Or shout it out. I mean, come on, family.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. There you go.
Good evening. Yes, ma'am. Appreciate it. Girl, I should have seen you at the airport. You should have met me at the airport. We'll talk later.
I have a question about in your monologue. I got it halfway through. Okay, I'm with you now.
Yep.
And King spoke about love was still the answer to and really pursuing truth. In this climate of alternative facts and fighting truth, I said it, but no, I didn't say it.
Right.
I said it, and just this cloud of confusion. How
Yeah.
And students and folks here really start to sort of work towards that, to clear that confusion.
Right. And I think, thank you for your question, I think we haven't tried true love. We've asked the oppressed to love. We've asked the oppressed to love back. We have asked the oppressed to turn the cheek and be bigger than, and be the moral compass of the country. But in this monologue, I make it very clear, I have been missing the boat. We've let the oppressor off the hook. It's time for you to love yourself. But in order to do that, you have to dig deep in that well of forgiveness. You have to love yourself. America has to love itself. And we've let the oppressor off the hook. Because our focus have been historically marginalized individuals and groups. To be the bigger people. To help this nation. Why those in power continue to suppress. Isn't that amazing? We continue to suppress those who are I said that we ask people to mend their brokenness, but only for the benefit of being broken again. Because as long as I focus on my brokenness, I don't focus on institutional and structural oppression. So it's a change, it's a shift. It's to redirect me to focus on minor things or grassroots things, which are awesome. I'm all about grassroots efforts. But it also takes our attention away from the systems and structures that are in place designed to oppress. So love has to be the thing that many of us in this room already know how to do that because we've been marginalized. We need those in power to find it in themselves. Because they often say, when you're hateful and ugly and nasty to people, there's obviously something you're dealing with. You don't love yourself. So we're nasty and ugly and we spit venom because we haven't dealt with our own issues. It's time for America to love itself and accept the truth that it wasn't fair for many people. And you know what? Those who are oppressed will lay out the welcome mat once again and say, we've been waiting on you. That's it. Don't want reparations, don't want nothing in return. We just want you to come to grips with the idea that you have wronged people for decades and generations. And we have already taken on the responsibility of forgiveness. We've already taken on the responsibility of agape love and unconditional love. It will be nothing new for us who love. It's only new for the oppressor. Paulo Freire, and I shared this earlier, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and I'm paraphrasing, he talks about the oppressed has the highest calling. They have to first free themselves before they free the oppressor. Because it's not in the nature of the oppressor to free the oppressed. That's not how they're wired. Well, time's up. Hashtag, y'all, I know y'all. Times all across the nation. Time's up. Amen? We just had church, y'all.
Anybody else? Yes. Could you go to the mic, please? Thank you so much.
This is Maria's question. Go ahead. No, I'm just kidding. Oh, dang it. You set me up.
I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, how do we get from here to there?
Yeah.
You know, Maria over the years, because of our friendship, has given me a lot of tools to sort of address the dogmas of racism, and she's also been very kind when I've said stupid things in front of her. She's very loving, and it's gotten me to another place.
Right.
I feel like everybody's in progress. But And the upsetting thing is, when I look around and I realize, damn, if I didn't know her and I didn't know these other people, there's so much racism, I'm so submerged in it,
Yeah.
I don't even realize.
Yeah.
So how do we get from here to this a higher place?
Here's the most difficult thing of what you're asking. In order for us to dismantle oppression, structural and institutional oppression, you have to be willing to not be the beneficiary of it. It's a conflict of interest for most. Because why would you dismantle a system that you benefit from? That is white America's greatest challenge, honestly, in those who live in privilege, because they're black privilege as well, to be honest with you. You have to be willing to give up some things, make room at the table for others. Most are not willing to do that because you're a recipient of it. You're a beneficiary of it. So how do we move it? You have to be willing to give up something. You have to take your bucket down in that well of hate, and you have to pull up that forgiveness. You have to pull up that love. You have to pull up truth and be honest with yourself. How have I benefited from standing on the shoulders of others? And who have those who are they currently standing on the shoulders of? You have to think about this thing in totality. You can't look at it in the micro right now. I need you to look at the entire system and say to yourself, I want to change the system. You have to be willing to not benefit from the system. It's a tough thing, but there's not too many professionals in here who have earned a degree, who are willing to step out of that world of privilege to help someone else. People, we have thought for many years, if I get a degree, I can do more help. I can help more people. Well, it's not working, right? Right. I talk about pockets of homelessness, hunger, poverty, sexual addiction, all the allegations that we're dealing with in the country. Something's not working because no one is willing to come off the hill. They stay on the hill. So it's a top-down approach. When I need you to be in solidarity with me, I need you to march with me. When Dr. King marched, if you go back and look at the pictures, it wasn't all black folks. It wasn't. Because he understood, I need America to be accountable. I need America to partner with me. And it's amazing because he said, I just need America to hold true to its values written in the Constitution. I'm only holding you to your own words. Well, Dr. King, that was actually a writing exercise. We didn't really mean it. You have to come down off the hill and walk with people in order for the system to change. And for those of you who do have a great consciousness and understanding of diversity and multiculturalism, if you're in a high place where you can really impact change, be the change. That means you have to impact everyone around you. That means you have to think different. That means you have to read. You have to do the maintenance. You have to watch shows. You got to think about your environment, your homes, what's hanging on your walls, the circle you hang out with, what your desks look like. That's a clear message. I was telling Maria, if we were invited here warmer, I would love to walk the campus because I'm like building to building. I'm like, it's serious out here. But I would love to walk your campus and look at the messages. The buildings I have been in, I've been paying attention to the messages. What has priority on the walls? What is it that students see when they come to your campus? What messages are being directly and indirectly pushed in front of you? Is it message of inclusion? Is it a message of tearing down strongholds? Is it a message of dealing with social justice? What is the message? Every building that you walk in, think about that for a moment. That's how we deal with systems.
So, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
No, preach on.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Marie, I wonder before we end, if you have anything you want to add. What are you thinking about in terms of when we think of building inclusion? How do we create space? And you spoke to this in an interview today that we did earlier. How do we create space and invite and encourage others to bring their full selves to that, which is what you talked about, that you were able to do for each other?
I think it's really important that no matter who we are, we examine our biases. You know, I think all of us, even for me as a person of color, like I have biases, I acknowledge that. And so how do I work on those unconscious biases that I hold? And I've had to do that. You know, and by doing that, you do it by educating yourself. You know what? For all the students, you all have Google. Back in the day, we had to go and look at the library and look at things and look up articles. There is so much information out there now that you can examine and read and look at different scholars and see what they're doing related to whatever subject you're interested in. If you look up implicit bias, you'll find a lot of scholarship on Google to be able to just learn and explore and then connect with people that you know, to have conversations. And you know, my approach has been, and we've talked a little bit about this, about activism, my approach has been, I'd rather have a conversation with you about how you, like where you're coming from, where I'm coming from, as like I am not one who like posts a lot on social media, because my concern is, well, I don't want to isolate people. Now, if they're saying something hateful, I will shut that down very fast. But I do not want to isolate people, because I always want to leave that door open, that I can have a conversation with somebody. And that by having that conversation, I ask that folks come in humility, and I have to come in humility to have those conversations together. And it's quite fascinating. And you start, again, as I said at the beginning, find the common thread. How do you connect with people? And so I just feel like one of my blessings in life is because of my very diverse background. Like people, like if you were to see me walk into a room, you would have no idea what my story is, because so many assumptions are made. And so also I have to be 3 steps ahead of people's assumptions sometimes about my identity and who I am. But just in having a conversation, I can break down those things and say, yeah, I absolutely know what it's like to live in rural white America. That was my experience. And people would never have guessed that by seeing me walk into a room. So just being open and willing to have conversations with people is, that's what I recommend to people, or that's your, you know, if you want to take something away, is just start with yourself and examine those things.
So we have to stop, because we can talk about this till tomorrow. But I want to say thank you to both of you for sharing yourselves and your stories. And I want to say thank you for helping us continue the conversation. And I particularly am grateful for the way that you speak to our students. I think that this is why we do this, because we want our students to find different ways to engage as we do this work. So thank you to all of you for coming. Thank you to those that are watching. And so this video will be made available at some point on the website. So if you have not seen it, or if somebody's not here you want to share it with, please keep an eye out for it and reach out to one of the people on campus that can help you get connected. Thank you so much, and go forth and work.
Excuse me, you may have one more thing. Just one more thing. I want to personally thank your president. Thank you, sir. Thank you for, you have a fine institution here, and a lot of people who have a heart connection to this institution, and that speaks of your leadership. And so I just wanted to personally thank you for what you're doing. It's a tall order, but you're doing very well. And not that you needed my affirmation, but I just want you to know, my first time visiting, this is a fine institution. So thank you for the opportunity. And I just want to say to the students, Dr. King said, we would have to repent in this generation, not for the hateful words of the evil people, but the appalling silence of the good people. We want to tear down systems. Some of us know those systems, and we know who's leading those systems. If you look at everything that's going on in our world right at this very moment, it's the appalling silence of the good people that's destroying us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.